My name is Alex Karbowicz, and I'm going to be talking about my final honors paper for the Honors Scholars Program. And I'm looking at what humans and gods owe each other. Just generally looking at the relationship between gods and humans in Milton's Paradise Lost and Homer's The Iliad. So what I specifically looked at was just different aspects of the relationship between humans and gods in each of these poems, but specifically on what humans owe God. In Homer's story, which is obviously a pre-Christian story, it's rather obvious that the humans are not given the earth by God, they're not created by the gods, but they do owe them prayers and supplication. And I'll go into a little bit of why. And in Milton's, the relationship between humans and gods is a much more Christian view, and humans owe God their relationship and their obedience. And I think most of all, their salvation. So obviously these two authors have very different notions of love and the love that gods have for the humans in this story. So Milton's God is much more of a paternal figure, in that he has unspeakable love and is overflowing with the desire for humans to love him, and he wants to give the humans everything he can, purely out of his love for them. A good quote that talks about this is found in book 3, where Satan, the arch enemy of God, looks at and is jealous of the humans, and he says of the humans that he has unspeakable desire to see and know all these his wondrous works, but chiefly man, his chief delight and favor, him for whom all these his works so wondrous he ordained. So not only has God created these humans that he's put on the same level as the angels, but he's also given them this beautiful earth, this beautiful Eden in paradise. And that leads to tension with the angels and some other immortal and other beings, but God the Father does it anyway. In Homer's story, it's a little bit different. Gods do have love, or more specifically desire, for the humans. Humans procreate with gods, and this creates half gods that are still mortal but very, very powerful, and including Sarpedon and Achilles are two of the most, well, Achilles is probably the most well-known, but I go into quite a bit of detail in my paper about Sarpedon, who is a son of Zeus, and who Zeus, though very powerful, Zeus does not choose to save Sarpedon, even though he is his son. But it becomes very clear that it isn't out of a it is not out of a lack of wanting to save Sarpedon that Zeus doesn't. Zeus just does not have the power to defy fate in that way. So some of the differences between the gods and their relationships with the humans. I should say some more differences. Milton's God does try to preserve the humans and the innocence of the humans. Adam and Eve are given Eden to procreate and love and enjoy, and to simply be happy, as this quote says from book 5. That thou art happy, O to God, that thou continuest such, O to thyself. That is to thy obedience. Therein stand. Now it's Raphael, who is sent by God, who says this quote, And it ends up being a really powerful one because, yes, the humans have been given this beautiful garden to live in, and yet they're unsatisfied. And God the Father knows that they will be unsatisfied. That's why he sends Raphael to give them this warning that they can lose paradise. And they end up doing so regardless of all of the gifts that the Father has given them. And yet, God the Father in Milton's story does continue to love them, even after the betrayal. And he goes to great lengths to continue to have a relationship with these humans and continue to save them, even though, and offer them salvation, even though they have chosen to turn their back on him. This unconditional, unwavering love for the humans is definitely not found in Homer's books. It's a very Christian notion. And so Homer's gods have very oftentimes not good reasons for turning on or supporting or not helping the humans in their care. This is a quote from the very beginning of the book where Apollo the archer has been sending a plague onto the Achaean force simply because the leader of the Achaeans has kidnapped one of Apollo's priest's daughters and refuses to give her back. And so the quote goes, "Beware, he casts no blame for a vow we failed, a sacrifice. The gods enraged because Agamemnon spurned his priest. That's why the archer sends us pains, and he will send us more." So simply because Agamemnon disobeyed and did something that the father, and not even that the archer dislikes, but that one of the archer's priests dislikes, Apollo has chosen rather wrathfully to let this plague fall on the Greeks. One thing that they do share, that the humans do share in these stories, is that the gods do ask for some obedience. In Milton's story, this comes as just the simple instruction to not eat the fruit. And even though they do, and they fall, Adam and Eve make the decision to live their lives beseeching him, so as we need not fear to pass commodiously this life, repairing where he judged us, prostrate fall before him reverent, and therefore confess humbly our faults and pardon beg. Now this quote is a little bit misleading because I explored more in my paper that at this time and throughout the book, it's not, aside from the choice to eat the fruit, it is not in Adam and Eve's hands whether or not they are saved. It is in God's hands, and it is on God's mercy. It's God himself who decides which humans he will save and which ones he won't. But Adam and Eve do believe that they owe him this obedience, confessing their faults, reestablishing that relationship with him. And I don't think Milton was, and Milton did write this intentionally. He does a really interesting way of talking about the humans and the gods from different points of view, and this is just one of them. The humans believe that they owe God obedience, and to a certain extent they do. Homer, meanwhile, the gods expect obedience and praise and gifts. There are a lot of notions of sacrifice, which I might go into further detail. But the gods do expect this sacrifice from the humans. They believe they're above the humans. And this relationship is very conditional on, like, the continuance of a good relationship is very contingent on what the humans are, like, basically what the gods want to do and what the humans do to provoke / enrage or placate and offer them sacrifices. So I think a really good quote for this is from Homer book 3, where he writes, "But Aphrodite rounded on her, in this case, her is Helen, a mortal, in fury. Don't provoke me now, or in my immortal rage I may toss you over, hate you as I adore you now, with a vengeance." So this just illustrates how both transactional and very on edge these relationships can be. So one of the final points that I talk about is that when the humans are defying the gods, in this case, Achilles is almost overtaken in his battle with the river god at the end, or towards the end of the book. When he's raging against the river, he wants to kill the river god, and he wants to kill as many Trojans as he can and dump them into the river. And the river god is pretty enraged at this. The river god, he's not even one of the more talked about or more powerful gods, basically begins to kill Achilles. Achilles kept on leaping higher, desperate now as the river kept on dragging down his knees, lunging under him. So it's very clear in this case, even though Achilles is half a god, his mother is Thetis, who's one of Zeus's daughters. It's very clear that even he is not strong enough to stand up against a god on his own. It takes Hera to help him actually get free of the river god, and it takes multiple gods to help him out of the river. Now, Milton's God, on the other hand, is not a vengeful god. Yes, he ends up creating this world that the humans can lose, and he allows the humans to have free will in choosing whether or not to stay with him and love him. But he makes a plan to save those who choose to be saved, and he offers himself as a sacrifice in order to make that happen. So he, rather than being wrathful with the humans, being angry with them, he is understanding and merciful, which the gods of Homer most definitely aren't. One of the other interesting points is that the gods of Homer are much more human-like. They are vengeful, they're proud, they're susceptible to the wiles of one another. At one point, Hera is able to trick Zeus and put him to sleep and take him out of the battle, even though he is called the most powerful of the gods. So they're not omniscient, they're not all powerful in the same way that Milton's God of Paradise Lost is. And this does impact their relationship with the humans in very interesting ways. So that is just a little bit of what I explored in this very long paper, looking at two of the most well-known epic poems that discuss two very different battles: the battle for humankind and the salvation of humankind, and the battle for Troy. So thank you for listening, and I hope you guys have a great surf.